And we are recording. This will be up tomorrow on Wednesday, August 13th, 2025 at 11:06 a.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Miles Harris, and the link to your YouTube is in the description. And my buddy Ian Burlingame, former Special Forces guy, former finance guy, recommended I have you on. He like sent me a link. He was like, "Get this guy," and I tell people what I always tell people is early on I always had to find guests, but as the show's kind of slowly gotten bigger, I just tell people I'm like, "Yeah, give me an email and I'll email them." And so he got me the email, which I imagine was on your account. And I emailed you and I was like, cool, put in a good word for me. He goes, oh, I don't actually know him. I've never spoken to him. He's just a channel I look at. And I was like, yeah, what are we talking about? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, fuck the emails are, yeah, so we're going to do the show, man. So yeah, having you on. And I always have to remember to sponsor. Guys, International Gladiator Beverage. It's an energy drink that's been sponsoring me for a couple weeks. It's probably the only apt sponsor I've ever had, not some random thing that no one uses. It's caffeine. I'm a manic person. Caffeine. I don't know how else to. It's a good sponsor for me. So go to the link in the description. Um, but yeah, just glancing at your show, talking about like tokenization and AI, and yeah, it does. I was just saying this to and I'll shut up in a second, and let you talk. But I was just saying this to my buddy who I always see who works in my building. He watches my show and he's like, you know, I just tell him, I'm like, dude, I can't do like the tit for tat. Like, can you believe Nancy Pelosi's? I'm like, it makes me want to jump out a window. It's because it never goes anywhere. It's just about dunking on the other side. Donald Trump he's scared now. Like, he's like, what do you like talking about? I'm like, man, I want to talk about like the coming AI Antichrist and like the control system. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I might do that today. So I'm going to shut up and hand it over to you. You introduce yourself. Everybody go in the description. You can find the link to his YouTube channel. I'm going to stop yammering on now. And you tell everybody who you are, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me on, Tommy. So my background is very much economics, studied economics at university, took a real interest in what were transitional economies at the time after the fall of the communist bloc and particular focus on like the likes of Poland, East Germany, Russia, and so on. And then that has sort of progressed into a series of crises that then subsequently happened in the developing world, to Asia, and then subsequently Russia. So that then became my focus, and that was the area of economics that I really started to really hone in on from around about 1999, and then went on to do a master's. And my thesis was all about the Asian financial crisis, the contagion across to Russia, then how that affected Argentina later, but at the same time you had China, which remained completely unaffected. So that was quite an interesting dynamic, which I appreciated studying. Thereafter, I sort of gravitated towards the city of London, and soon decided really that that wasn't going to be for me. And ever since, yeah, I've just remained passionate about economics. So I got into investing in real estate, and like I think my first mortgage I ever took out, was self-certificated loan where I was basically saying, oh yeah, this is how much I earn, and it just shows, what was likely to come. And of course, then we had 2008. But I think I first got into real estate, what, about 99? Yeah, so that's sort of my background overview, and right now I'm just really sort of paying attention to what's taking place within the financial reset that is deeply underway, and that has numerous themes which I think are of key interest to everyone really. So I've got a playlist which I've developed on this, which firstly focuses on gold and the way that gold is being repositioned and reallocated across the world. And of course, central banks are becoming big buyers of gold once again. And that's obviously a big theme because the old saying, "He who owns the gold makes the rules," and so on. But then that evolves into the sort of control system that is actually being embedded within all of the countries of the world, and it doesn't really matter where you are. So whether you're comparing, say, China, Russia, the US. the EU, or even Africa. These nations are adopting similar approaches. Everything is being built on the same pipeline network ultimately, and that comes down to a electronic data interchange, a messaging glue, if you like, of the ISO 20022, which allows essentially really enhanced capabilities for the monetary network. And the monetary network, as it is clunky, it's slow, it's inefficient. If you've ever tried sending money overseas, it's problematic, it's expensive. So there is a need for such a system. So ISO in itself is entirely neutral. It is what is actually built into the system there, which I find so interesting.
What is before that? How old are you?
Oh, what am I? 40, 47 now.
I thought you were, I'm 35. I would have said you're a couple years older than me. Good for you. What is ISO?
Right. So ISO is effectively the messaging glue, which enhances the capabilities of financial messaging. So, for instance, it has rich metadata as one of its key aspects. That key aspect enables know your customers, the whole KYC information. It has anti-money laundering information, which can be ensured that you know who the recipient is, you know who the originator of that payment actually is, and it will also attach reasons for the payment that is being made, as well as invoice numbers and so on. So it's really quite a sophisticated mechanism which categorizes all of this data in an XML format. Now, what's so significant about that is, of course, that you've got the cross-border interoperability, so that enables that messaging to take place between different currencies overseas, but it also ensures that CBDCs will have, and stablecoins will have, sufficient detail actually plumbed into every payment that is actually being made.
Is this an inevitability? I mean, as somebody with a biology degree that knows nothing about finance, is something like this an inevitability? And it just from the most basic kind of my view, it almost it's like a ball bouncing and it goes up and down and up and down. You can track it over, millennia. And we always kind of have these moments where it seems like the power is solidifying, and then we have these periods of seemingly like a breakout type thing. As the comedian Doug Trussell says, history is just a series of assholes gatekeeping ever diminishing concentric circles. And it really, if just in its most raw form, it really is. I mean, it's like the mass being said in Latin, or the printing press, or the radio, or TV, or whatever. And it does kind of feel like that. I mean, if you were to go back and, they were less aware that was the whole point of the propaganda. But if you go back to like the 50s, 60s, 70s, probably even 80s and 90s, it's very clear in hindsight to us about the centralization of media, right? Like six major broadcast corporations in the United States. Everybody knows about CIA, Mockingbird. And that's very clear. And if you just look at that with no conception of anything else, you might look at it from the early 20th century to the late and say it's circling the drain. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Bush Cheney come along, and then they start doing domestic surveillance, and it's like, oh, this whole thing's kind of wrapping up. The tyranny is, the wrench is closing. But then you kind of have this insane breakout where it's like you have Napster and LimeWire, and you don't fucking need Blockbuster anymore, and Facebook and Instagram, and it seemingly goes haywire. And then crypto comes along, and it's all bananas. And right now, it kind of, I would say it seemed like it peaked in like 2020 of the reconsolidation, stay in line with Facebook, Instagram, YouTube for, talking about COVID. And it really kind of seems like, oh, it was tightening up again. It's tightening up again. And then Elon Musk, we can't say his name because people love him or hate him. Remove any emotion. Just he's a dude that bought a platform and there's less censorship. That's just what it is. It's kind of breaking out again. And as he did that, the other, because censorship really only works when it's wall to wall. So after that, you have people like Zuckerberg. They're like, well, if people can go to Twitter and see the uncensored shit, we're just losing heads by not having him here. So they start removing the censorship stuff. Then YouTube does. So from like the simplest glance with no wisdom in any of this is that it really is just the ball going up and down and done, 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 and it tighter, looser, tighter, looser, tighter, looser. It would make sense that now that we're some years into crypto, and I know nothing about crypto, it makes sense that it looks like it's coalescing to some sort of, you know, CBDC total control grid across the whole planet. But in the devil's advocate defense, in 2020, it kind of seems like we were doing that with vaccine passports, where it's like, man, you're not going to be able to leave your town if you don't have. And that didn't happen. And it's not that it wasn't for lack of effort. They tried. And I mean, as Ram Dass would say, a system can never understand a system meta to it. It can only understand something less complex. So we will never truly be able to understand the human brain because we are the human brain. A super AI could, but a super AI couldn't understand itself. So it's this looking in the mirror. It's meditation. It's who's watching the watcher as it backs up more and more and more. So it does seem like no matter how vicious and brutal and broad scope and complex and whatever than well funded their plans are, history would point to it hits sort of a natural ceiling and then comes down. And that's not like an optimistic view. A lot of times the natural ceiling involves the deaths of millions of people. I'm not I'm not lightening that. But that whole tangent to say, does this seem more like an inevitable thing? Like, well, of course, it goes online. Of course, the petty tyrants, they're gonna try to turn it in to a whip to get everybody to fall in line. Just not good or bad, agree or disagree. Does it kind of seem like that is maybe something that this is? It's just the latest iteration of everybody get in line.
Certainly an interesting one. I think when it comes to aspects such as the pipeline network that we were just talking about there, ISO, that they started actually testing this back in what 2004. So this is like decades in the
Yeah.
making. This, so that's certainly an inevitability. Um, but then when you look at, say, for instance, central bank digital currencies, well, they've obviously been met with a huge amount of resistance there. And that resistance has certainly got us has got us somewhere where there is this kind of natural hatred from those that are more aware of what's going on towards such a sort of surveillance mechanism and a programmable mechanism added to money, which is just entirely wrong. In addition to that, I think most people really understand as well there is no actual use case for central bank digital currencies because we already have digital currency. We already have bank digital currency, but it is not central bank digital currency, and so that's a key point, I think, in terms of understanding where we are. And the more people are aware of this, of course, the more resistance that can generate. Now, in the States, now, of course, you've got the advent of the Genius Act and these stable coins.
What
But the state
what is the Genius Act? Sorry for ignoramus like myself. What is the Genius Act?
Yeah, so I think there were three components within it off the top of my head. And essentially, what it did was say we're not going to have a central bank digital currency, but we are actually going to introduce stable coins. Now, in some ways, stable coins are somewhat worse than central bank digital currencies. And the reason for that is because under the Genius Act, which then enables these stable coins to be issued by private corporations, for any money that is deposited with one of those corporations, they will then buy an equal amount of US Treasury bills, so short-term US T bills. Uh, and then they will mint the actual stable coin. So, what is actually happening there is that the private corporation is minting the currency and then holding a UST bill. And in holding that UST bill, it is, of course, going to generate yield of, say, what, 4 to 5%. So it's going to generate that 4 to 5% off that newly created currency, basically. So That is quite profound because what you're doing is you're taking the public debt and you're effectively turning that into a private revenue stream for large corporations. Now, I did see a chart recently looking at Tether and its profit per employee, and it is just absolutely absurd. And it completely blows Nvidia, who's in second place there, out of the water. Now, I think these US firms that will be issuing these stable coins, the likes of Wells Fargo, Citi, JP Morgan, PayPal, etc., they won't be as profitable as that because I think they're going to face tighter regulation and they're going to have to invest in UST bills, whereas Tether has more diverse reserves as its asset base. But nonetheless, it's still going to be very, very profitable. And of course, the taxpayer is really sort of funding this, and what you are thereby doing is you are encouraging taxpayers by proxy, courtesy of the private stablecoin issuers, to hold US debt.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm trying to follow. It's a lot of alchemy to me. Um,
it is alchemy. It's financial alchemy. That's exactly what it is. It's synthetic dollars.
in my, I mean, my understanding of fiat currency is The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. That's about my understanding of it. And it's like, all right, it's all fucked by gold. All right, like that was the takeaway because you can print more, and with Thomas Jefferson, the whole central banks are more dangerous to a country than a standing army. Isn't this just like fiat currency times? Because fiat currency could at least say like it has the limitations of. Well, I know most of it's not printed, but they print some. I was gonna say that they have to print it, but they don't. Most of it's ones and zeros, but they have to print some. Like there's some, you know, evidence to the fuckery. With this, you could say, well, with a crypto, it's you can't because it's all blockchain and whatever. Okay, yeah, sure. I just know when I look at that, and I don't doubt that it is the task of the millennia to try to whatever, hack Bitcoin. But there's also, what was it Bill Gates said in that like 1990s article or 80s article, you'll never need more than 640 kilobytes of memory. You take a selfie right now and send it. That's about, I don't know, what, 20, 30 megabytes? Just a selfie. Each episode I do is 20 gigs and it's nothing. And I
Mm.
upload it to platforms that have 10,000 other podcasts. So they're even back, you'd see those like black and white photos of like the 1950s. It's like a military jet landing and they're bringing something to Fort Meade for the NSA. It looks like an outdoor air conditioner. It's a giant cylinder and it's 5 megabytes of memory. It's like surrounded by armed guards. Okay, given enough time, they're gonna break it. They're going to break it. It they're going the Wright brothers to 747s. Like humans are good at that. We're gonna figure out the puzzle. And when that puzzle gets figured out, not if, but when, won't that just be the problems of fiat currency times infinity? Because none of it will be printed and no one knows, and it's all private wallets, and you you wouldn't even have to make a big deal about it. You could just with a stroke of a pen go, we're quintupling the money supply and not tell a soul, and no one would even realize for however long it takes for inflation to become apparent in the marketplace. Isn't that where all this is, which shouldn't be a surprise, right? Because the people that are in charge and are running it are not doing it for you and I. They're doing it as a mechanism of control. But that doesn't it kind of seem like we're walking towards that? And it's under the guy. It's like the anglerfish with the little light. And you go, oh, it's the light, and then it's the jaws of Satan. Aren't we kind of going towards that? It's the new gold. It's the new gold rush, or going out west and Bitcoin and all that. Doesn't it kind of seem like it's just like like a Pop Tart in the middle of a bear trap? Like, does it not seem like that? Do I have a simpleton view of it?
I think there's much sense in what you're saying, to be
Oh
honest.
God, I was hoping you were gonna
Yeah.
tell me I'm wrong. No.
Um, yeah, I'd love to think otherwise, and I remain open-minded.
Yeah.
But um, my larger concern, I suppose, with stable coins, just going back to that, because it does relate to all of this really, is the fact that there's this notion of what's known as the Triffin dilemma, where the US, as holder of the US reserve currency, or the global reserve currency rather, it needs to always ensure that it doesn't have just enough dollars for itself, but also sufficient dollars overseas to complete international payments. So a Brazilian firm invoicing a Chinese firm will do so in dollars. And so that means that they've got to be able to get a hold of the dollars to pay that invoice. So what does that mean? That means that the US was ultimately expected to run trade deficits to ensure that dollars were exported overseas.
Okay.
And thereby, that always ensured that US manufacturing would be, in the longer term, decimated because of the need of
Cheap
the
labor.
global community for dollars. So with the stable coins now, that shifts that dynamic. So when it comes to issuing stable coins, you're issuing them directly against US debt. And so if there's a growing demand for US debt, then it means that there's a growing demand for more US Treasury bills to be issued.
Okay.
So if you want more dollars, you've got to produce more debt essentially. So of course, US debt now hit what, $37 trillion dollars. It's on that exponential path. And so as demand grows internationally for US dollars, then the debt will continue to go up as well. So they're sort of matching one another, if you see what I mean there.
Okay.
So we're shifting the actual perspective of the Triffin dilemma away from the trade deficit and exporting dollars on that front to the government federal deficit.
Okay.
So the more demand there is internationally for dollars, then the more demand there is for UST bills. So that's the sort of dynamic that's at play here. Now that is particularly worrying because you've got the asset, which is also increasingly going to become a risk vector. So the treasury bill itself, as the debt becomes greater and greater and greater, it becomes more of a risk. So that risk element grows and what is supposed to be an asset. And it is mad when you think, we're just talking about debt as an asset here. And that in itself is just insane, really.
It's yeah, it's an emergent property, I guess, of 8 billion self-aware nodes walking around on the earth. It's and as it gets less and less stable, the full faith of the US government, it's like, well, cynically, isn't that
I'm just
backed
going to put my
by the
light on here just to get a bit more light, Tommy.
Yeah, you're good.
One second. Oh.
Cynically, isn't the like the realpolitik of it? It's not backed by anything. It's backed by 13 aircraft carriers. Like, is that kind of and like it's funny and like it is, but isn't that kind of the reality of it? Like there is a tether. It's not backed by nothing. It's like it or not, the US is a fortress separated by oceans with the largest military known to man. Isn't that wouldn't that be the counter to the risk vector? Or do you just slowly erase that by, rising China or a China-Russo, whatever alliance? Wouldn't that be the and then also if the debt's raised, and again, if you can't tell, I know nothing about this. I have a biology degree. If the debt's raising and that the international demand for it is also pushing it up, doesn't that exaggerate the negative, I don't know, vibe around the because if you just look at the debt as like, you know, I owe you $20 and I owe you $50. And if it gets to a point where I owe you 37 trillion, you start to go like, yeah, that's not good. But if it's something else, it seems to be that you're illuminating it to me, is that there is another aspect to it. And it's no, it's one to one. that we're not one to one. There is a correlation between foreign dollars. So that in a way kind of makes the debt seem less insane or less, I don't know, of a pending problem. Is that anywhere near reality?
Yeah, it certainly could be. And I think the way in which these stable coins are going to be pushed is going to be very, very heavy because there is the financial incentive, as I said before, i.e., the yield on the treasury bill, which is encouraging these financial corporations to ensure that people do want to participate with these stable coins. And in addition to that, if you are exposed to a domestic currency in the developing world and you've got sort of 15% inflation, you're not really going to want to hold your domestic currency. You'd rather hold a US dollar stable coin. So there is that aspect to it. And I think internationally it's going to be very, very popular. And if you also consider what's taking place with the EU right now, and the way in which the UK and the European Union are almost being just completely bypassed by what's taking place towards the east and with the US. We've got two real dynamic power plays that are really taking place. Meanwhile, everything in the UK and EU is almost anti-growth, really, and anti-economic strength. Now, that in itself might also feed more demand for US dollar stable coins. But the risk, I think, in the longer term is that if there is a fall in demand for US stable coins, then that's when the backing could be tested because it would mean that bond values or treasury bill values would fall substantially. And that would then test the actual backing of the mechanism for the stable coin. So we've already seen this, what is known as duration risk with SVB Bank, and when that went bust. And the reason that happened was because the rise in interest rates, which caused dramatic fall in bond prices, because there was a lot of bond buying that took place by banks in the era of what COVID and 2020 and all of that. And so as interest rates rose, then it meant that they were sat on enormous unrealized losses. And they were ultimately forced to start selling some of that portfolio to actually realize those losses. Because otherwise they're not marked to market. It's all a little bit complicated and convoluted, but yeah. I'm just saying that, this isn't going to happen overnight. I'm thinking sort of 10, 15 years time, really. But the sort of crisis that this could create would be just absolutely unprecedented because you would have people across the world holding US dollar stable coins in private wallets. So you're almost outsourcing risk to private corporations and private individuals across the world.
How do you get out of that? It seems, it's kind of hard because most of the world is, but isn't, again, in broad strokes, isn't most of human history just kind of funding domestic problems by growth abroad? I mean, very loosely, expansion.
Mm.
Could that be solved with start, you know, asteroid mining or what they're talking about with power plants on the moon? It just in the most basic sense, like I don't know, I look at it like microbiology or something. It's like yeah, a lot of the issues it's kind of just dealt with by just growing more and just eating more. You're you're outsourcing your own issues to the substrate that you're eating, right? It's just we're moving forward, we're doing more. Hunter gatherers, we're moving to the next thing. But, given enough millennia, we kind of covered the earth, right? And what aren't cities are used for manufacturing or they're barren wastelands or we're just stripping the resources out of it. And I'm fine with that. I'm not a hippie. I think that's just what you have to do. You have to eat the rock you're born on. Instead of moving all this shit around, because that's what it kind of feels like is we're moving things around with a finite amount of stuff. And it would be like if I needed more podcast episodes. So let me try to explain it like this. And um So what I started doing was started cutting the episodes in half. So now instead of 1,800, I have 3,600. There would be a temporary boost in viewership because there'd be more episodes. Oh, you saw Miles Part 1? Did you see Part 2? Okay. Well, we could ride that for a while, but then that would sort of, people would get adjusted to that. And then I would have to maybe split it again or do something else about it. But ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm still chopping up the same amount of finite episodes. The real answer is, much like working out or dieting, is you just have to embrace the suck. Hey, do you want more episodes? Yeah. Well, then get up, put on a shirt, invite a guest, and do the show. And it's going to take an hour out of your day. Do it. If you want to lose weight, you can cut your hair, you could take a big shit, but ultimately it's like you got to stop eating the McDonald's. It's just you got to eat eggs and spinach. It sucks, but it's what it is. But when you do it, your body changes, or this is another episode. You're just getting out and you're doing the work. And at a certain point, doesn't there need to be a physical backing in 3, 4 dimensional space time to why these things are expanding? Because it seems like we're just doing this whole, well, actually, now we're cutting up the shows into 10 pieces each. And it's like, yeah, how long can this go before somebody finally goes, like, there needs to be new episodes? Doesn't it seem like we have to? And I guess the flip side would be like, you don't need to do that. You could just, in a sense, outsource the debt by creating a war and then killing a whole nation and stealing their resources, and that would kind of even it out. That seems to be more likely. But doesn't it seem like there needs to be like a reason for expansion other than, and albeit impressive, accounting, alchemy, wizardry? Doesn't there need to be something behind it?
There certainly does. There certainly does, and it's really high time that we appreciated that as human beings, because I think there's a desperate need for us to actually go back to first principles, really. And if you consider money, for instance, money is, in my eyes, really just an abstraction of what is real wealth.
Yeah.
And well, what is real wealth? It's about your community, it's about your family, it's about your ability to provide for yourself, so that within that you can actually include tools, skills, and so on. And so this abstractive nature of money itself has become a real source of tribalism, which I don't really understand, to be honest, and I feel is just so short-sighted, when actually there's a common enemy that humankind faces, and what we really need to do is just ultimately go back to basics, because this whole financial alchemy is the root of all these crises, and it is the root of exploitation. The financial sector used to be just an appendage to what was the real productive economy. And now it absolutely dwarfs that productive economy. And that's why wages don't keep up with asset prices, and there's so much inequality as a result.
In terms of actual production, yeah, it does have to be backed by something. Food, water, a door that locks, all that good stuff. If you were to run the Earth simulation a zillion times, what are the chances, or in your opinion, no right answer, that this is actually the least worst way about it? In terms of like, okay, tyrannical powers, unjust wars, but I don't think anyone would say we live in 1984. There's not a clear power faction. It seems to be different groups. All right. On the other end, we're not in Mad Max. I mean, we can be hyperbolic. I could be like, the immigrants coming over the borders. Yeah, but I mean, we're not. I can go to the grocery store after this and go get some food. Like, we're not in Mad Max. And it's also, I can do this episode with you and I'm not instantly nuked like I was a couple years ago. So we're somewhere in the middle. That's not that bad, all things considered. For 8 billion people, or, however many billions have lived since 10,000 BC till now, is there any chance that this is like the least worst outcome? Is this weird game of, because it used to be like, hey, we can't pay back the debt. Like, all right, let's just invade them, kill them all, make them slaves, and that will kind of even it out. Versus now, it's this. game of we're gonna bundle this up here, and this is actually backed by that, and this is actually an interest on that, and we're basing this on a future, we're doing this, and this is a here are NFTs. Here's a kitten. It's pink and it's worth $86 billion. It's goofy and it can be used for wrong. Is there any do you believe there's any chance that this what we are in is actually kind of like the least shitty outcome? Or one of them, maybe not the least. I mean, the best would be utopia. But like all
Oh
things
yeah.
considered, is like since August 9th, 1945, with the bombing of Nagasaki, the dawn of time up until then, the number of people dying each year in war was going up in terms of, I believe, total numbers and as well as percentage. Since then, it's been slowly going down. Doesn't mean it's been peaceful. Korea, Vietnam, Soviets in Afghanistan, us in Afghanistan, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza. It's still bad, but percentage wise, less and less people are dying. It's technically the safest time to ever be alive in America, despite what we see. In that, and I know that's a low threshold of like, well, if you weren't raped and killed today, then you're doing good. I get that that's a very low threshold. But seeing as how that is the norm for Homo sapiens, is there any way in which if you go back in time and do it differently, you might be like, oh God, no, let them do the loans, let them do the bailout. That was so much less worse than, nuking London. Is there any way in which this is just like not the absolute worst? There's no right or wrong answer, but
No, of course. Well, there's certainly a lot to be said for what we do have, in this day and age, and it's really quite striking when you get a comment on a video which alludes to like, why did I have to be born now or something like that? And you're just like, look, come on, just think
yeah,
about what has actually happened through history,
yeah,
and the times that people have been through, and like, there's a real need to actually properly man up and get on with things. And I think first and foremost, just get out into nature, and that puts everything into perspective, really. I was out with my son this morning fishing, and just doing that is just so good for the soul. It's
oh
so
yeah,
good for the mind and the body, and it's just so powerful that. And in that sense, yeah, absolutely. But then I think, when you're living in certain cities, well, I largely kind of consider cities to be centers of obedience, really. You think about the way that people conduct themselves with regard to one another. There's no morning, how you doing, whatever. It's very much a kind of cold, isolated environment where people are left kind of staring at their screens and so on. And well, humankind can certainly do better and should have done better than that, I think. But to be able to get out in the countryside, where I live, well, I'm absolutely blessed, to be honest. So, yes, I do take the point, and I do think that there's far worse times that we could have been alive in. So that's certainly true. And yeah, we've got a battle on our hands right now, and
yeah.
we've got to roll up our sleeves and really get on with that.
I guess I look at it as like growing up, like we were always moving every couple of years, and I never had friends more than like a couple of years at a time. And to me, it was just the worst thing in the world because I'm 5, right? And then I'm 10, and then I'm, high school. And like now I look back at it and I'm like, parents are married, still married, nuclear family, grew up in a very nice neighborhood, private Catholic school. Mom got to be a stay-at-home mom. We didn't have nannies. I never once went without food. I look at it now and I go, yeah, shut up. You had to
Mm.
move. Yeah, sure, it sucks. Make new friends. Shut up. Even kind of like a darker level. In 2014, I lost my older brother to suicide. Worst thing ever. It's been 11 years, and I now more than ever, I go, I would still take my life over any other life in human history because Still have still have a nuclear family. Still have parents who love each other. We all talk. It's not some weird disparate family. I talk to some people and they're like, "You haven't talked to my brother in years." I'm like, "Oh my God!" Like I send a meme to my brother every day, like my two brothers every day. I call my mom every day. I go and see them once a month. I go, "What do I do for a living?" I do a podcast. Is it difficult? Sure. Compared to anything else, no, I'd rather do this. All that in totality, obviously I would do anything to have my brother back. But man, I think I'd still choose this ride over almost any other life in the history of me. It'd probably be really nice to be like a trust fund kid. That I'm sure that's fun. I bet it's fun being Post Malone and Tom Brady. Okay, granted. But I look at that and I go, I'm still just so grateful to be alive and to have family and to have food and water. It doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. That's not an excuse to say, and we're not going to do better because of it. No, absolutely. Get out there and make it better. But I guess whereas the years immediately after my brother were more of woe is me, I now look at it and go, I have two other brothers. Like, thank God. I have, two loving parents. I have cousins. I get to do this for a living. I don't have to wake up and go, oh God, I gotta get. I'm like, we're gonna talk about this today. Who knows what we're talking about? It does mean there's not room for improvement. Always get better. I'm with that. But just being very realistic, if somebody went, all right, you want to re-roll the dice on this life, there's a very small chance you get to be Tom Brady. There's an overwhelming chance you're probably going to be some peasant in like ninth century Turkey. I'd go, yeah, no, 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 I'll take this. Even with the hardship of, yeah, yeah, no, I'll do that again. I'll absolutely do that again. I guess that's kind of how I look at it. And it might sound pessimistic, but honestly, I think it's the opposite. So you just said, man, every day after the podcast, I'll go and sit on my porch and I just see like the birds flying over trees. And I'm like basic stuff. I'm like, how great is it that like my lungs work? How great is it I have legs? And I know, again, very aware that it's like a low threshold, but man, it can make life a lot better when you just look at something like a cup of ice and you're like, man, cold water is so great. It doesn't mean don't make the world better, but I guess I'm not saying that this is for or against anything you're saying. I guess I'm not black pilling on all of it because I'm not sure this is the worst outcome. I think that's where I'm going with that. Sorry for that. You're
I
getting the guest
completely
treatment.
agree. And I think that's one thing we're so short of, just that appreciation of nature, as you say there, listening to a bird song,
Yeah.
that's something quite special about that. If you actually take time to listen.
Really just hear a bird and you go,
Yeah,
this is a biological Bose radio that flies around and sings to me.
yeah. It is just absolutely incredible, and the beauty that we have outside, is just wonderful. And that's something we've really got to behold. And, of course, our loved ones and the appreciation that we need to have is so important, I think. And gratitude just for the little things, as you say, to be well, to be healthy, like is just absolutely enormous. And that just changes your whole outlook on life. Because of course there's a lot of black pill stuff, and when you start really digging into the economics and the finance and so on, so it can become quite sort of overwhelming. And so you just got to step back and say, right, okay, well, they're doing this, but what am I doing about this? And how much of my life am I actually going to pay attention to this and focus on that rather than what I should be focusing on in terms of what I should be building in terms of true wealth?
Now, the devil's advocate position could be, all right, so Tommy and Miles, you guys are both in agreement that life is beautiful and you should be grateful. Then it's worth preserving and not letting it get worse. And that's why you have to oppose these systems being brought in. Sure, sure. Yeah, no, I get that. It's and I guess another part of me is it's like I'm just not. It's like, is anybody surprised when yesterday I had on Bradley Birkenfeld. I've had him on once before. He was the largest uh tax fraud whistleblower in United States history. Basically, he was like the sole person which destroyed Swiss banking as it relates to private individuals in the U.S. He ended up going to prison for it, and then he got let out, and the IRS gave him a $104 million uh, whistleblower reward. So now he lives in like I don't know the Maldives or something like, and it's I look at a guy like that who just stuck to doing what he believed to be the right thing. But it's also like as you're learning about it and you're hearing about his stories, the first time you listen, it's shocking, and then you listen to it again, you go, Why wouldn't this happen? Why wouldn't there be politicians and billionaires showing up with bars of gold and stolen art? It doesn't make it right, but I'm not surprised. So when you find out somebody in the whatever in some sports is on steroids, you're not surprised. You're not happy about it. But you're like, yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate competition. It's, the apex of competitive spirit. Yet people are going to do anything they can to get ahead. It doesn't make it right, but I guess I'm just not surprised or taken aback that, yeah, of course people are trying to take this thing, which on its face should be great. Yeah, it's digital currency. We no longer need physical stuff. And yeah, they're trying to turn it into like a global concentration camp. Like that's not good. But I guess I'm also just not entirely surprised, which maybe I should be. But I don't know, I do have confidence, and it's probably nothing more than, I don't know, belief in God or things that work out better. It doesn't seem like we've never hit a world totalitarian government. People get close now. It's also technology. We might be getting a lot closer, but the empire always rises and falls. I guess I'm just not entirely convinced that like this is the end. Not saying that that's what you're putting forward. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe my optimism is completely unfounded. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh, it's so true. Well, in crisis, comes opportunity. It's the old saying, isn't it? And I think that's profoundly important. And I've been doing a series of videos looking at economic history and really, really sort of dire, horrific circumstances that people found themselves in, and yet they were still able to pull through, or many were still able to pull through, and to continue to prosper within enormous hardship. So we do have it easy in comparison to what has gone in the past. That's for sure.
And then on like a much bigger picture, we're, forget finance. Isn't this just the iterations of reality? It's never going to be tranquil, and you probably don't even want it. I think Alan Watts, the old philosopher, he's like, yeah, your whole life you're trying to take your life, which is this, chaotic storm, like this ocean, and you want to turn it, and you try meditation or LSD or whatever, and you get the feeling of like a flat lake and it's all peace. And he goes, and once you've been on that flat lake for a while, you start to realize that it is very boring. And what life is the base of a waterfall. It's turning up. There's no grime on the surface. There's no bugs. It's just chaotic, but it's fresh and it's clean and it's clear and it's bubbling. Isn't that sort of like the friction of reality itself, even beyond just Homo sapiens? Isn't that reality itself is perpetual friction, and it drives forward new complex iterations? Like what drove us from being shrews after the KT impact to you and I now talking at the speed of light? It's friction, and if it's not fine, it's going to be the next thing. Don't isn't it? Wouldn't it kind of be absurd to assume it's ever all going to work out? And then furthermore, would you even want it to all work out? You ever finish a book or a video game, and then you just feel hollow because you're like, now what? Do we even want that? I mean, doesn't it feel like that is like what like that animating spark, the you plug in the when the power goes out and then it randomly comes back on, and you hear like the microwave beep and the fan starts going and stuff. Isn't that what friction is in just reality itself? Isn't that what pushes this shit forward? Or am I just completely detached? Not that you have the
Well,
answer.
Well, incentives are so important, aren't they? Yeah, you've got to have incentives within any sort of thriving economic system. Most basic incentives there, of course, survival, pure survival. And beyond that, yeah, you start to expand your capacity within the sort of whole Maslow's hierarchy. Um, and Yeah, you want to build community and you want that social connection as well, but you also want to sort of, in time, fulfill what potential you have as well. And that's important. I think if you've got a system which actually encourages people to actually do that, then that would be beneficial to all. And then just coming back to what we have currently, I think obviously what gets people really sort of upset is the sort of unfairness and the inequity of the current system, and how that could be sort of redressed to some degree. But of course, there's very powerful forces that don't want that to be the case and do want people to actually kind of, remain in a state of fear and not wanting to actually fulfill their potential and not believing in themselves.
And then lastly, does everyone even want to be free? And that, so like early on in the podcast, I got banned from YouTube for having all these doctors that were talking about COVID, even the guy that invented the COVID vaccine and blah, blah, blah. And as it went on, we were all sort of drinking the same Kool-Aid. Like, no, no speech should be censored, blah, blah, blah. And then as that went on, and I still believe that, what I started to realize after years of that was not everyone really wants. A lot of people do like a patriarchal figure, be it legitimate or tyrannical. And I'm not even personally, that's not for me, but I understand in the same way. Like, I don't know, I like cold weather over warm weather. I understand preference. What I started to realize was, yeah, no, some people just they want the boot. They want the jackboot. And I don't know if everyone feels the same thing. When I look at I lived in suburban Atlanta for 15 years, went to high school there and college at the University of Georgia. And I spent 2 years at Valdosta State University, which is this tiny little school. It's 7 hours south of Atlanta. It's like an 1865 time capsule. It is just comically racist and backwoods. And I have a friend there named Grant, and Grant lived on like 1 trillion acres. He had a pet alligator and he had a pet deer named Jesus and Elvis. And he had a car with no windshield, and he would just drive it through fields. And he's like, if anybody ever tells me not to do this, I'll kill him. And I'm like, that's insane. Like that's insane. I look at my friends that lived in Atlanta, and they were all okay with like, yeah, your Metro Pass, yeah, sure, it documents where you are, and there's cameras everywhere, and it's every step you take is surveilled. But they don't care. They're like, yeah, I'm willing to give that up for the convenience of living in a city to where you don't have to drive 45 minutes to a gas station. You don't even need a gas station because you don't have a car, but you can walk outside and you're downtown. And you go into a city and you go, yeah, I can see where this is seductive. I can see like walking around Lower Manhattan. You go, yeah, no, I get it. I get it. It's not that one is objectively right or wrong. Well, I personally think freedom is objectively right. Let's pretend there is no objective. It's really just a difference of the guy that lives down in Valdosta, Georgia, with who keeps like a shotgun on him at all times. He can't comprehend and doesn't want to comprehend any form of surveillance, even a red ticket light or a red light camera. The people that live in the cities, they don't want to be anywhere near that guy because they like being in sort of whatever a more progressive hub of whatever. Isn't that a huge factor in this? Is we're talking about it, hey, this is a system of control. This is a system of we're going towards an exponential, the hockey stick and blah blah blah. Aren't there some people who they just love that? They're like, yeah, you ever see those people that are like, I got a chip in my hand, I just wave things and I'm paid, and it's like you're chipped. And a part of me goes, you're an idiot, and then you realize, no, they're not. They're very aware of it, and they're very aware of the surveillance capabilities, but they live in downtown Shanghai, and they're like, Yeah, it makes my life so much easier. And they look at the guy that lives up in the mountains, they go, that life sucks. I wouldn't want that at all. Isn't that a huge part of it? Like a lot of people just kind of want the power figure. They want the strong leader. They want the jackboot. There's no amount of enlightening them. There's no amount of showing them, hey, did you know this? No, no. They know. Some maybe don't. And you show them and they change their mind. Some of them do know. You go, hey, there's more than one color. You're wearing a blue shirt. I'm wearing a blue shirt. Somebody comes along and goes, there's another color. It's called red. Some people would go, I've never seen red. I like that. A lot of people would go, no, I've seen red and pink and green. I just like blue. And you go, oh, I thought you weren't even aware. They go, no, no, no. I like blue. Isn't that a huge part? A lot of people want to be cattle. Is that like a super pessimistic view? Like, don't a lot of people want that? They want to be herded. Not that you have the answer, but
Oh, it's so true. They certainly do. Like one of my oldest friends, actually, who still works in the city now. Um, yeah, when I last saw him back in May, he said, like, give me the chip. I want it in my hand.
that's what I mean.
Literally, he's like, if it will make my life easier, I'm all for it. Now, I just can't understand, and obviously find that pretty difficult to tolerate. As a perspective, I'm just like, what? Seriously? And this is a guy who grew up on a farm as well. And yeah, his outlook on life just changed dramatically when he went to university. And yeah, then he's very much in the material world, and that's his core focus. It's all about that that sort of asset wealth, and pursuing that sort of financial gain and all of the rest of that. And yeah, I mean, it can be difficult and frustrating to maintain ties with him at times, but he enjoys winding me up, and
Yeah.
I enjoy winding him up. But it's like what Yuri Bezmenov has said about this, that for some people it will just come too late, and suddenly they'll
Yeah.
realize, shit, what have I done?
The gate will close behind them and then it will
Yeah,
be too
and then
late.
they're like,
Yeah.
hang on, I didn't bank on this. Like the news told me it was okay.
Yeah. You active measure. Yeah. You get closer and closer. Demoralization. You stupid pit or whatever you're saying. But,
Mm,
and that's where I kind of come back to. I do believe freedom is the objective good because the ultimate end state of wanting the jackboot is getting the jackboot.
mm.
And then it's death. But in the meantime, yeah, I don't think it's, I don't, some people maybe are unaware. I think some people know exactly what it is and they love it. Yeah, every day my food gets dropped at the front door of my apartment. Yeah, man, I get it. I get it. Convenience is great. I just, I guess I'm more of so like, how does this apply to us as people? It makes me less stressed and less black-pilled to go, no one's paying attention. They don't see where this is going. I go, no, a lot of people do see it and they're fine with it. And although I don't think that is good at a large scale, I am smart enough to know that I'm not going to convince 50 million people who disagree with me. So what can I do? Like you said, you go outside, man, watch the sunset, go to the gym, be armed, have dried food and water, not dried water, but yeah, be okay. And you don't need to hold that burden or hold the chains of like, no, I have to wake people up. Some people you can wake up and they're grateful. A lot of people, they are awake. They want it. And you go, oh, okay. It feels less like I got to break you out of prison. If in your mind and in your conscience you felt like you had to break everyone out of a prison with 1,000 beds, that's quite a burden. If you finally realize that once you did blow down the gates, only three of them wanted to leave, you would stop stressing about the other 997. Doesn't mean that you're okay with them being locked up, but you might relieve yourself of that burden and go, oh, I'm going to go live my life. They want that.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't know.
That's what we can do. Lead by example. If we set an example, if they want to follow, then that's good on them. In terms of waking people up, well. we're getting a little bit late in the day for that. So I think that the more proactive and positive approach is really let's set an example to them. Let's show them how actually we can live. You know, if that works for some, great. If it doesn't work for others, well, there isn't anything else we can do there.
And lastly, and we'll wrap this up. And yeah, if you can't tell, this episode was nothing about finance or anything. It was any which way. That's kind of the experience of my show. Is I love Cold War history. I love reading about people who, built their own little bunkers in their backyards and they stashed all this stuff. And it's just interesting to me. I don't want any part of it. I'd rather be killed in a nuclear explosion, but whatever. And sure, we have the gift of hindsight. And if I looked back at, I don't know, somebody who was my age in 1950. So they were born in what would that be 1915, right? So 35. And they're like, yeah, I'm building, I'm putting all my extra money towards this and I'm building this. And after a couple more years, I can add another part to the bunker and blah, blah, blah. You do all this stuff and they're prepared and they're ready. They're going to survive the bomb throughout the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And then you get to like the 80s and the 90s and they're getting older now. And then like the Soviet Union falls and then no nuke ever came. You don't regret it. You have a family. It's good to be prepared. But can you imagine them going back in time to like 1950s version of themselves and being like, dude, enjoy life. Go see the Beatles. There's a hint. Hey, there's a guy named Jimi Hendrix coming along. Like, watch for that. Wouldn't like you get to see the first cell phones the size of suitcases and wouldn't you look at that and be like, you spent so much time concerned. It doesn't mean don't be concerned and don't provide for your family, but this whole what happened to the nuclear bunker? Oh, yeah, I think it's like grown in now. It's full of like plants and raccoons and shit. Yeah, no, you don't need it. Wouldn't you kind of kick yourself a little bit and be like, I didn't go to anything in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. I didn't go to Kiss. I didn't go, watch the X Games in the 90s or something or watch Michael Jordan on the 96 Bulls. Wouldn't you kind of feel a little bit duped?
Oh, you certainly would, wouldn't you? You really
Yeah.
would. And that's why you've got to enjoy life and you've got to appreciate every moment. As many books point out, you mentioned Alan Watts there, Ram Dass and so on. It's all about the moment because nothing else truly exists.
Yeah. Be here now. That's Ram Dass.
That's it.
Be here now. Just be here now. And yeah, we'll wrap it up with a Ram Dass quote of what time is it? It's now. What time will it be in 6 months? So you set your alarm, and then 6 months from today, and it goes off. What time is it? Well, it's now. It's always now. And that doesn't mean you would also feel like an idiot if nukes did happen and your family died of radiation poisoning. You probably would have been like, yeah, I probably should have put like 2% of my paycheck towards a bunker. I'm not saying don't be prepared. Have a lock on the door, have a gun. I get all that. But I would feel like a real idiot if it was 2090 and I'm looking back and I'm like, yeah, the central bank thing never came. Like the total, they never did the vaccine passport. Yeah, there's skirmishes and wars. But I missed all the 2020s, the 2030s, the 2040s. I missed the 50s and the 60s and the 70s because I was so hyper paranoid about, some totalitarian AI. What happened with AI? It ended up being nothing. It didn't work. Like, it might be something like that where you go, I wasted all of it. And I think that's maybe what I'm fearful of is not giving in to pessimism. So, um,
Yeah, it's a great point.
well, hey man, thanks for coming on here. If you can't tell, there's truly, I told you beforehand, I said, I don't know what we're talking about. And I was honest, I have no idea what we're talking about, but I appreciate you coming on here, man. I'd love to have you back on again sometime. Um, where can people find you other than your YouTube? Can you send me links and stuff? Twitter, or tell them where to find you.
Yeah, so I'm obviously on YouTube. So if you search up Miles Harris, that should come up. And then on Twitter or X now, I think it's Miles Harris LGA at X. Yeah, so that's my handle there.
Well, send me those links. I'll put them in the description. And if you want to come back on here sometime, maybe we'll do it again, and I'll just mute myself, and I will let you explain.
Oh, we might get onto tokenization next time as
Uh,
well.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That happens a lot of times with guests. They come on here and the show ends up and they're like, "We didn't even hit." I'm like, "Yeah, sorry about it. I'm not in control of it either. It just goes." Um, but dude, I'll send this to you. It will be up tomorrow. Um, and I would love to have you back on again sometime, man. I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Tommy.
All right, brother, and be here now. Thank you so much.